So what's new in MVC 5.0? As with the release of any new platform or upgrade to a platform, there's always a bunch of new features that come out. Well, MVC 5.0 is no different. The first thing that you're going to see that's different is there's this new concept called OneASP.net. The idea behind it is it simplifies the project creation process. Instead of having a bunch of different project types to choose from, you choose the OneASP.net project type, and then from there you can further customize what components you want to include in your project. Everything from ASP.NET MVC to web forms to your authentication method, so on and so forth. And so Microsoft's goal here is to simplify the project creation and cut down on the number of different project types to choose from. The next feature is the addition of Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a very, very popular CSS framework originally created by Twitter. It is used on all types of platforms for web application development. MVC 5 now includes it by default. So when you set up your new MVC 5.0 application, it will include the Bootstrap CSS library. The next new feature is a thing called attribute routing. In MVC 4.0, 3.0 earlier versions, the concept of routing, the idea of being able to call a URL that does not necessarily map to a file, but instead routes to a controller and an action, has been around since the very beginning. But now there's a new way of doing it using attributes. The ability to decorate a controller or to decorate an action with an attribute and set up your routing rules and constraints from that perspective. The next new feature in MVC 5.0 is ASP.NET Identity. In earlier versions of ASP.NET, there was the membership and simple membership providers for handling your authentication, managing your roles, and that kind of thing for managing security in your application per user. But the new ASP.NET Identity is a whole new way of implementing your authentication and authorization using claims-based. It also allows two-factor authentication as well as integration with third-party providers such as Google, Facebook, and Twitter so that you can log in through those popular websites, allow people to log in into your application. Next, we also have authentication filters. Authorization filters have been around for a long time and have been a mainstay in setting up the security for your application. But authentication filters actually run before authorization filters and allow you to handle on a case-by-case basis authentication depending upon which parts of the application that your user is trying to access. And finally, we have filter overrides. Filter overrides basically allow you to define filters that apply to most of your application, either at the global level or at the controller level, and then have the option, when needed, to actually override or turn off those filters at a controller action level or even at the controller level. And so those are some of the new features that are available in MVC 5.0. Next, we have MVC 5.1. In MVC 5.1, Bootstrap support has been further enhanced for editor templates. Basically, there's a new HTML attributes object that you can pass in to set all types of new properties for your Bootstrap components. Next, we have enum support for views. Now in views for your drop-down list, you can actually populate them from enums. Makes that process a lot easier. The next new feature we have in MVC 5.1 are some further improvements to attribute routing, including having constraints applied to that routing. Next, we have unobtrusive validation for min-length and max-length attributes. You can apply these attributes directly onto your models, and then using the unobtrusive validation on the client side, the constraints of these attributes will be automatically applied to your models. There's also now support for the this context and unobtrusive AJAX as well. And then finally, what's new in MVC 5.2? Some additional improvements to attribute routing. Basically, there's now a new interface, iDirect Route Provider, which according to Microsoft allows full control over how routes are discovered and configured.